All right, we're back for chapter 3. If you've been following along, I am reading The Journey to Self. It's a book that I am currently in the process of writing. So let's jump right in. Chapter 3. Definition of confidence. Confidence is something that I've struggled with most, if not all, of my life. Even after I started gathering the pieces to define self, there was no confidence in my definition. It was like I was creating boundaries without having a plan of action for how I'd move if or when someone overstepped them. I constantly found myself acquiescing to the beat of others' drums. Rather than it being from a lack of understanding myself, though, it became the result of me not wanting to sever relationships or hurt feelings. Truthfully, I wasn't confident that I could be loved and chosen despite me disagreeing with others. When I looked up the definition of confidence, here's what I found. A feeling of self-assurance arising from one's appreciation of one's own abilities or qualities. To me, the key word is appreciation. It's one thing to be aware of self, it's a whole different thing to appreciate self. Confidence in self is the icing that awareness in self needs to truly go from being basic to phenomenal. Thankfully, I've gained my confidence. There's a saying that goes something like, I'm humble enough to know that I can be replaced and wise enough to know that there's no one like me. That's the difference between arrogance and confidence. Arrogance tricks you into thinking that you're solely the cream of the crop and everyone is beneath you, while confidence shows you that you're the cream of your crop and others are the cream of theirs. A lack of understanding of this difference is part of what kept me entangled with low confidence because I've always sought to remain humble. Nowadays, I can walk past the mirror while wearing my muumuu and my hair in Felicia braids and smile at myself. I instantly tell myself how beautiful I am. I even prance around the house loudly singing love songs to myself. And honestly, that's how I know I have it bad. But it's such a fulfilling feeling, and it reminds me just how loved I am, even if I'm the only one that loves me. So let's talk about how this lack of confidence has played out in my life. When I got engaged for the first time, I was young, in college, and terrified. A decision that should have been just as easy as breathing was complicated due to my lack of awareness and confidence in self. When he asked me to marry him, I thought he was joking, and truthfully, I always thought he was joking when it came to us. However, I now know that I was deflecting. Because I never believed in myself, I could never truly believe in us. To me, it was inconceivable that he could look at me and see someone worthy of loving and choosing for a lifetime, especially because I knew there were girls far prettier and better suited for him. So my lack of confidence and being completely unaware of self allowed me to put limits on his love simply because I deemed myself to be the girl next door. I've always been close to my parents, and for many years, I allowed their decisions to govern my life. When the opportunity to make a decision arose, I called one or both of them to inquire about how they'd navigate their way through. It was less about me wanting to please them or make them proud because they've always been proud of me. For me, it was more about me not being confident in my decision-making abilities and not wanting to make mistakes because I was the picture of perfection. But we'll explore that later. So when I got engaged, I naturally called my parents to share my good news. And they were less than excited at the thought of me getting married so young and moving halfway across the country. Now, in their defense, this engagement came out of left field. I told you that I didn't take him or us seriously, and so I never gave anyone in my family the opportunity to take him or us seriously either. My folks knew of him, but they didn't know him. They'd heard his name in bits and pieces, but there was never a point where I sat down with them and expressed any of what I'm telling y'all. My parents just assumed that I was never really interested in anyone at the time, honestly, and I never guided them otherwise. My parents will read this book and call me flabbergasted, wondering why we were so close and still are. Yet I never shared any of this with them. The answer? Imagine creating your own world. You understand all the inner workings of this world because you created it. Imagine someone wanting to rip the rug from beneath you and shatter this world that you've worked so hard to create. You wouldn't know how to survive. In that same way, I had created a world where I was undeserving of love and being chosen by anyone outside of my family. I had relegated myself to being the old woman with cats, even though I've always had a great disdain for cats. My biggest fear at that time was having my heart broken. So I had already learned how to protect myself. I just didn't realize how deep that protection stemmed. And now you're probably wondering why. You're probably asking yourself why I created this world in the first place. You're probably on the verge of beating yourself up about it all as if you didn't do enough. Truthfully, though, you did everything you were supposed to. I was always loved well, regardless of my inability to see it. I think I just had really big feelings that I didn't know how to navigate or address, so bearing them seemed much easier. Looking back, though, I didn't consider the cost. Okay, so back to my story. With what little information my parents had about my relationship, they both advised that I instead choose a long engagement and finish school before getting married and moving. They were concerned about potential roadblocks that could come up if I got married before having finished college. What they may or may not have known at that time is that he'd already spoken with the university and created a plan for me to transfer in, keep my same degree plan, and finish school on time. Now, to be frank about it, I don't blame my parents, though at a point in time I did. Here's the thing. Had I taken time to truly express myself to my parents, they would have heard me. And whether they agreed with my decision or not, they would have supported me fully, because that's just who they've always been to me. But rather than owning up to my own shortcomings, I used them as scapegoats for years, even to myself. And I know I have some of y'all riled up right now. I know what I'm saying is hard to digest no matter what side of this decision you fall on, but let's stay focused. The issue here is my lack of confidence in myself. And if you're riled up just reading about it, imagine how many folks were riled up living it. This is why healing matters, because we do not exist in a vacuum. And decisions that you make impact more than just you. At that time in my life, the only confidence I had in myself was self-deprecating, which caused me to dismantle a lot of folks in relationships. Fortunately, I've been forgiven by all involved, and I've learned to forgive myself. I've also had conversations with each of my parents where they both advised that I should have made my own decision, and maybe getting married and moving then would have been good for me. But as y'all know, hindsight is 20/20. So who knows how it would have turned out had I followed that path. What I do know is this, and I want you to hear me clearly. God gives messages and directions to people, and he doesn't always convey the same messages to everybody. Sometimes he only gives you a message because its content is just for you. Will you trust him? Will you have confidence and move even when the world stands against you, but God is giving you direction and guidance? Before you answer, be well aware that the confidence you have in him is rooted in the confidence you have in yourself. Arguably, to get closer to God, you must get closer to yourself also. Nowadays, I'd say that my confidence is pretty high. I advocate for myself and my children with little to no issues. There have been numerous times that I had to take a stance against people that I love. And guess what happened? I moved in a way that was organic to me, and they loved me just the same. Mind-blowing, right? Hard to conceive that relationships aren't built on folks moving in a way that the other expects or suggests all the time. Crazy how that works, huh? How did I learn to be so confident? Well, I started with the concepts mentioned earlier, learning to love myself and becoming aware of myself. I started giving myself the freedom to take up space, and I stopped shrinking, constricting, and diluting myself to fit into the box that I thought people wanted me to fit into. I stopped being who I perceived they wanted me to be, and I started learning who God created me to be. Additionally, I learned how to make decisions in a vacuum. I've always heard that when God is all you have all that you need. And I tested that many times over. Perhaps the biggest decision I made in this vacuum was my decision to uproot my children and I and move halfway across the state. Don't get me wrong, I had help, a ton of it. But I told God that if he wanted me to move, that he'd make it happen. And I fought peril after peril to move, but God did what he always does, and he showed up big for me in ways that I'm still discovering 3 years later. God showed me that I can trust him. And don't get me wrong, he's always shown me that. But I now also understand that I can trust me because I trust him. He is a part of me. And for me, learning to lean into myself meant learning to lean into him. Message. Mark 10 tells us about Jesus going to heal a little boy. The father essentially asked Jesus if he can heal his child. Jesus responded with, New Living Translation, if you can. I think Jesus said that with his whole chest. Like, if. Everything is possible for the one who believes. The man then cried out that he believes and asked Jesus to help his unbelief. What do you believe? In Exodus, where Moses asked God who he should say sent him, God said, I am who I am. But again, what do you believe? Being aware of self is highly important, but what happens after you become aware? With Adam and Eve, that awareness led to shame, embarrassment, guilt, and the need to hide from God, who'd already seen everything they were trying to hide anyway. What if we instead use our awareness to build confidence in ourselves and in the God that we serve? Be fully aware of who you are, but you also have to believe in and walk in it. God has gifted you with special gifts and talents, 1 Peter 4:10. But if you don't believe that you're capable, what do you have? God says he planned a life for you, Jeremiah 29:11. But if you don't believe you're deserving, Jesus said everything is possible to him who believes. So again, I ask, what do you believe? Action item. I want you to grab 2 different colored writing utensils in your journal. Then I want you to venture off somewhere away from everybody. And I want you to set the atmosphere. I want you fully vulnerable, open, and comfortable because it's about to get real. Once you're seated and soothed, I want you to take a moment to take some deep breaths, settle the anxiety, frustration, and any mood running rampage that isn't peace. Once you're settled, I want you to choose a writing utensil and write every self-deprecating thought that comes to mind. Now here's the thing. I need you to skip a line between each separate thought, but I need you to be open and fully divulge every self-defeating thought that you have. Don't edit any out. When you're done, put down your writing utensil. You can stop reading here and complete the first part of the assignment. Now, I want you to pay attention to how you feel. Feel your breaths as they escape your body. Pay attention to where your mind is and if you're still calm. Focus on you for a moment. What state of mind did those thoughts put you in? If you're anything like the rest of us, you're in flight mode where your breaths are quicker and shallow. You're likely all over the place and rehearsing a bunch of bad scenarios or experiences. Your body is in survival mode, and being in that mode for an extended period of time is not healthy. Pay attention to your body and the way it's speaking to you right now. Now let's pick up the other colored writing utensil. On the lines that you skipped, I want you to flip the sentence. So if your self-deprecating thought was, I am ugly, I want you to write, I am beautiful on the blank line. I want you to flip each self-deprecating thought to something full of confidence. And when you're done, I want you to once again put down your writing utensil and take inventory of the language that your body is speaking. Going forward, I want you to recite at least one confident statement to yourself daily. I want you to keep this list handy and read it daily. Part of learning is rehearsing. So we're going to use this list as an opportunity to rehearse confident statements so that our confidence can be bigger than our self-deprecating thoughts ever was. I love y'all.